This is the
Five Starr
Podcast.
Let me talk to you. Hi. What do you guys want to talk about? This is such good shit. Thanks, guys. Back to you.
Well, I'll give it this. The WWE always outdo themselves with the production on these things. Even if the cards are terrible, even if there's so much wasted time and dead airspace on these 4+ hour marathons, or 8+ hours if you count both nights of WrestleMania, they always make it look big league. The staging, the lighting, the production, they never miss on that. I love the completely arbitrary weather report they gave at the top of the show. That was different. They did it on both nights, as a matter of fact. Kept flashing up the weather graphic on screen. It's funny, all of a sudden it went from a wrestling show and turned into a local town news outlet. So it's the biggest mania of all time. Gotta set a precedent from the beginning. It's a new generation, a new era, a new beginning. So who better to open up the greatest/biggest WrestleMania of all time but Hunter Hearst Helmsley? You had to know. That big-nosed egomaniac. Of course he was going to be the first thing we saw. He didn't really say anything aside from what I just mentioned in passing a minute ago. Literally, it was theme music, long dramatic entrance, new generation, new era, welcome to WrestleMania. And boom, that was it. I mean, the entrance, I think, was nearly double the length of the actual promo. But apparently it's a new era. I have no idea what that means. Just sounds like more corporate lingo to me. So as we go into our opening match on the card, well, I learned a few things here. Even before the opening bell, I learned that for the most part, most contemporary bands are utter trash. Especially the punk rock heavy metal groups. And most of them can't lip sync worth a shit. Including the vocalist for Motionless in White. Never heard of the group beforehand. Can promise you I won't be listening to any of their stuff anytime soon. And I learned that Becky Lynch wrote a book. And she stole Nia Jax's gimmick, where the entire premise of her novel is that she's not your average girl. Correct me if I'm wrong, that was Nia's gimmick at one point, wasn't it? That she wasn't like most average girls. So it's the Women's World Championship match. Becky Lynch versus Rhea Ripley. Poor Becky was apparently going into this thing with strep throat. Probably didn't help that they were wrestling outdoors in cold temperatures. I mean, if Becky was sick going in, this certainly didn't help to alleviate her of being under the weather. And it was definitely noticeable, especially when you look at the close-ups of Becky's face. She was visibly whiter and, dare I say, bloated in the cheek area. I mean, they almost sort of inadvertently made Becky's illness the focal point of the story here. And, I mean, given the handicap of Becky's condition, I guess you have to take that into account when critiquing the match. Honestly, some of the best parts of the match, I thought, were the series of 1-2 exchanges they did. Especially Rhea. I mean, she was really laying into those work punches. I mean, I want to try to be as fair as I can, because it's easy enough for me to automatically dismiss this. I'm not the biggest fan of modern women's wrestling these days. Mostly in that it's frequently rammed down my throat, and I mean, most of the girls I see on mainstream TV have horrible basics. I think when it comes to Rhea and Becky, this is arguably their class of the top 2 women in the division. They're presented like main event stars. They have the main event look. People actually react to them like they're big deals. I'm not going to say anything crazy like they're the modern Austin and Rock of the women's division. But they're definitely head and shoulders above most of the female locker room, right? Hopefully we can at least agree on that. So there is a level of expectation when you see a match like this on paper, especially when it's booked for a WrestleMania card. It was fine. In the scope of main event level title matches, what they did here was all right. It was a modern WWE main event type match. If you're into the spamming of big moves and kickouts galore, you probably thought more highly of it than I did. I'm just generally speaking not a big fan of these types of matches. The whole big move, kick out thing, where they hit each other with everything in the book, do multiple near-fall sequences in one match. Of course, they also have to show the reactions of the wrestlers and the fans whenever the person kicks out. It's so repetitive at this stage. Like, I've seen this exact kind of match over and over again for years now. Not just in WWE, but AEW too. And it always bugs me when I see this kind of stuff opening the matches on these cards. Wrestling cards in principle should have a level of growth and progression as you move up from the prelims. Like when you got prelims where the talents are going out there and doing all these big moves and multiple kickouts, I don't know. To me, you're taking the piss out of everything that comes after it. At least that's my opinion. I didn't even really have an issue with them opening the card with the girls. Again, at least Rhea and Becky are top of the card performers in the women's division. I truthfully have not been all that impressed with Becky's work in the last several years. Ever since she came back from her maternity leave, a lot of her work has been less than stellar. She's lost a ton of weight, a lot of muscle mass. Her booking's been all over the map. She's not really booked on the same level she was several years ago when she was like one of their hottest merch sellers. And people were actually buying tickets to see her stuff because she was that white hot. Whiter than she was in this match. I kid. Sorry, that was a bad joke. Like I said, I didn't hate the match, but it was a very paint-by-numbers contemporary wrestling match. I've seen this booking formula far too many times. I'm just kind of over the whole video game move spam stuff. It's boring. Maybe that's the old grumpy fan in me talking. But I know for a fact I'm not the only one that's had this opinion for a while. Rhea retaining? Not really surprised by that. The rumor I heard is that Becky's contract expired recently. or that it's about to expire. So I'm not even sure where she is with the whole negotiating process. I don't foresee her leaving WWE. Maybe she's trying to push for a little more money. I mean, the company hasn't really seemed to value her on the same level they did a few years ago. So if and when Becky does resign, I'll be interested to see whether anything changes with her current booking or presentation. I mean, I've been down on her for a long time, and I don't think it's anything she's doing. I think it's the way she's been factored in on the card. She's not as big a deal right now as she was, say, in 2016, 2017, 2018. Whenever that period was that she was really over. And that's how long it's been. I can't even remember at this point. As for Rhea, I guess she keeps barreling through the girls' division until they find the next big credible babyface to challenge her. You'd think they're saving that spot for Jade Cargill at some point. But after the performance I saw from her later on, not holding my breath there. Now, we'll get to that match. But that was basically a way to whet my appetite for what was to come. I was at least willing to roll the dice and give Becky and Rhea a chance. There wasn't any chance in hell I was going to do the same for this 6-team ladder match clusterfuck. Absolutely not. I put my foot down with this one. If there's one thing I was not in the mood for on this night, it was a car crash jackass stunt show routine. Nah, man, I've seen enough of these kinds of matches to last a lifetime. They don't do anything for me these days. With all the injuries we see in today's product. God, why would you even entertain the idea of booking a match like this? It's not like the ladder stipulation is something they dig up every year at WrestleMania as a special attraction. It used to be when they did Money in the Bank. Then they fucked it up by making it its own premium live event. I mean, how many ladder matches have we seen in just the last 6 months? In WWE or AEW? Most of them are completely unmemorable. They're all the same. And well, actually, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself here. When I say I didn't watch the match, what I really mean is I had it on in the background while I was doing other things. It's not like I had the luxury of skipping over it because it was live. So I had to at least monitor what was happening at certain points. From what I saw, it looked like the exact kind of stunt show I figured it would be. I saw guys bumping through furniture, taking really stupid bumps. Of course, they had to get the tables involved, because it wouldn't be a ladder match if it couldn't involve tables at some point. It's got to involve chairs and kendo sticks and all other kinds of plunder. Also, the jackass hardcore fans can beat off the stupid ECW nostalgia. They were in Philly, so guess that was to be expected. But the booking here made absolutely no sense. So, okay, let me get this straight. It is a ladder match with both sets of tag titles at stake. The match can't end until both sets of titles are retrieved from the overhang. But if a team grabs one set, they can just grab the other set too. They're still technically in the match. So are we to believe the entire foundation of this match was just so they could find an excuse to make the tag titles ununified? Even though they've been unified for well over a year? And at least all these dumb spots where guys are making these alliances and going, well, if you guys go after the red belts, we'll go after the blue belts. Basically saying, Doesn't matter what color belts we have. They're the tag titles. When's the last time tag team wrestling ever mattered in WWE? This was so fucking stupid. I mean, in the end, I guess the people got their WrestleMania moment with R-Truth grabbing the Raw belts. It was a cathartic payoff for everything that's been happening with R-Truth and the Judgment Day on Raw. Beyond the finish, though, I mean, the whole concept of the thing was so dumb. It was literally just a lazy excuse for them to go back to separating the tag titles and putting them on both brands. I mean, I didn't even bother writing down who was in this thing. Does it matter? It's not like the tag division means anything in WWE. If tag wrestling really meant anything in this company, don't you think they would have made a concerted effort to build up legitimate feuds between two teams? With main event stars? Treat it like something we need to pay money to see a blow-off to? Instead of just throwing a bunch of bodies into a garbage match, they could do spots. You see, like, man, this is why I don't even bother talking about much modern wrestling anymore. It's just so fucking stupid. Like, when I was a kid, tag team wrestling actually meant something. If Ric Flair and Sting were fighting for the singles title in the main event, then the Midnights were right underneath that, feuding with the Fantastics for the tag straps. Or Tully and Arn were doing shit with Luger and Barry. Main event stars. With heated rivalries that made you care. This is what tag team wrestling is in 2024. It's a fucking joke. But it's a new era. New era. Right. Sounds like the same old lame shit to me. So I'll be honest. After I walked out of the room during the finish of that match, I ended up missing a good chunk of this tag match with Dom Mysterio and Santos Escobar versus Rey Mysterio and Andrade. Oh yeah, Andrade's back, by the way. That was a crucial element to this match. This was something I vaguely remember they were teasing on SmackDown like a couple weeks ago. I initially thought the game plan was to do Dom and Escobar versus Rey and Carlito. I mean, that's at least what made the most sense on paper at the time. But then I saw some graphic on a website where they were advertising Dragon Lee as Rey's partner, which I was like, okay. I don't really care about that all that much. Then Andrade showed up here. I didn't even realize it was fucking Andrade until they zoomed in on his face. Started laughing. I was like, oh, that's Andrade. Where the hell did that guy come from? Apparently they shot something on the Go Home show that I missed. This was his return. I don't know what Andrade has to do with any of the LWO stuff, but whatever. I mean, he left AEW after whatever drama was going on with him over there. What was it? He spent like a year trying to get himself fired, but Tony wouldn't let him out of his contract. So he just paid him to sit at home and do nothing. Yeah, it sounds like Tony Khan. Apparently he's out of AEW purgatory now. And he's back in WWE. Allegedly where the grass will be greener. That is until he realizes he won't matter at all, and he'll just go right back to being another body on the roster. I mean, from what I did see, the match was okay. It was just kind of your average top-of-the-hour TV match. Of course, by the end, that's when everything started breaking down. I looked up at one point and just saw a bunch of small guys going airborne in and out of the ring. Looked like kids at the trampoline park practicing their aerial parkour routines. I don't know. I mean, everybody's all about their WrestleMania moments these days. Is it really too much to ask for somebody to just grab a hold every now and then? I think it was actually during this match where I asked myself, can anybody recall the last time we saw a simple body slam? Or a one-tackle drop-down hip toss? Nobody does that shit anymore. I guess because it would be considered boring. Right, yeah. Makes sense, because, if we're not bouncing off the walls 15 seconds in, we're going to lose the people. Got to do as many flashy moves as we can before the people go into a medically induced coma. So, I don't even remember what happened here. Right at the end, we see two giant guys in lucha masks jump the guardrail and start beating up the heels. Apparently, security were clued in to be on the lookout for two nondescript 7-foot giants with Ray masks on. Yeah, they were going to hop the guardrail and run interference at the end here. Just want to let them know, no, it's okay. They're part of the act. So the babyfaces won due to planned outside interference from a pair of giant men in lucha masks, who we found out were either current or retired football players for the Philadelphia Eagles. Right. Because it wouldn't be a WrestleMania if we didn't have the NFL overshadow the pro wrestlers. And we just recapped WrestleMania 11 here on the channel. For anyone curious about the WWF making a mockery of their own profession. Honestly, I think the most telling thing about this was that once they had everybody in the ring for the post-match celebration, the two most foreboding men in there, the fucking football players, they like double the size of the pro wrestlers here. That right there. If there's ever a perfect image for why the wrestling business is dead, that. When the football players dwarf the pro wrestlers and make them look like high school children. Fuck, dude. What happened to this business? So that brings us to a match that I knew was going to be booked for the card. Never really gave much forethought about whether or not I was interested in ever seeing it. The brother versus brother showdown between Jimmy and Jey Uso. In hindsight, when I think back to my initial outlook, because again, I figured they were going to do this match eventually, I said, this will probably end up being one of those matches where the promo package beforehand ends up superseding anything they actually do in the match. Boy, does it suck being proven right all the time. Oh my God. It's tough, man. It really is. I mean, on paper, you look at a match like this, after everything we've seen transpire in the last year with the Bloodline, the back and forth we've seen with Jimmy and Jay and the angles and all the talk segments, it's really hard to imagine a scenario where seeing these guys wrestle in a one-on-one match wouldn't work. But then you get to the reality check where you kind of realize it's Jimmy and Jey Uso. And the truth hurts. Some people might not want to admit this. They're really not that good on their own. Yeah, they've done the sibling rivalry before in WWE. I think I even remember talking briefly about this when they did that Matt and Jeff Hardy feud years ago. Didn't work then. I don't think they really meshed well as opponents together. Even though they're technically not brothers. I mean, they did something similar with Edge and Christian prior to that. Again, those matches I never thought were all that great. It's the curse of the family feuds in WWE. The stuff with the bloodline worked temporarily because there was actual drama and long-term story development to lead up to those blow-offs. I really like that Roman Reigns Solo Sikoa versus Usos match from last year. The Roman J match from SummerSlam, not so much. A lot of that was due to the booking, though. I just always kind of had it in the back of my mind that I really wasn't going to enjoy this. And a lot of that boils down to the simple fact that when you remove the training wheels and you look at the Usos when they're completely out of the picture of anything involving Roman or The Rock, they really don't flourish well on their own. This never really had the drama that so much of that bloodline stuff did throughout all of last year. Nothing they did here gave it the impression these guys were trying to settle a score. It just looked like two backyarders trading super kicks for 15 minutes. They tried some stuff to play to the fans' emotions, but God, the acting was so bad. I mean, nobody bought it. Yeah, this sucked. Sorry, not sorry. Didn't work. Nobody actually believed these guys hated each other in real life. I mean, Christ, they pretty much let the cat out of the bag when they inferred that these guys have been begging management for a match at WrestleMania for years. Well, they got one. And it went just as a lot of people assumed it would. They did their spots. Jay eventually won clean. I literally don't have anything to say about it. I went in with zero expectations, and they met the bar. With Jay winning clean, one can only hope to God they don't plan on prolonging this feud. God, if they try to expand this into multiple match series, someone please fucking shoot me. I think the biggest shocker to come out of all this was that Solo was nowhere to be seen. You'd have thought he'd have tried to come in to at least help Jimmy cheat toward the very end. No. The only thing we got was Jimmy trying to sucker in Jay with a fake apology. And after we got the near fall where Jay kicked out of the splash, that's when I knew that there was no way Jimmy was winning this match. And he didn't. So babyface wins clean. Good. Hopefully they move on from this and try to pretend it never happened. So then we come to the 6-woman tag team match, where I was basically tuned in to see one thing, and that was whether or not they made the right booking call by putting Jade Cargill on the spot. It was a risky move, judging what we've been hearing about her improvement in the ring since she signed with the company. There's a reason she's been off of main roster television for the most part. But just to set the playing field here, the match is Dakota Kai, Asuka, and Kairi versus Naomi, Bianca Belair, and Jade Cargill. Above all else, I think the biggest test for Jade here was seeing whether or not she could outwork Naomi's piss-poor performance. Holy fuck, she looked awful in this match. Am I the only one that saw how slow she was moving? How many steps did it take for her to hit the ropes? 17? I don't ever remember Naomi looking this bad in a match before, but she was horrible here. Maybe she got hurt. I don't know what the deal was, but bad. Just bad. The rest of the girls here, I really wasn't paying all that close attention, if I'm being honest. Again, I was mainly checking in to see what Jade's involvement was going to be. And they milked that moment for all it was worth. I guess I should also point out, when it comes to Jade, she went with a very retro look for this match. Cut her hair short, slicked it back, kind of going for that punk rocker look. I think it was the same color it was on SmackDown the other week. I mean, she definitely had a grayer tint because she used to be blonde. So again, going back to that conversation about WWE presentation, they made her look like a big deal. So it's like, I mean, how do you evaluate Jade's performance? I don't think she visibly fucked anything up. Her stuff didn't look necessarily fluid. A little raw when she was trying to feed for the Japanese girls. She obviously had pre-planned spots going in, that was evident. It usually is with the girls' matches. Basically, here's what she did. She got a flurry of offense going on all three heels. They tried to feed for her as best they could. Again, didn't look remarkably crisp. There was a weird tilt-to-whirl backbreaker she gave Kyrie that kind of looked awkward. Not really sure if that was the planned spot, but something looked off about that. She also gave Dakota a horrible back body drop where Dakota came down and landed right on her hip. And there was something else she did to her a few seconds later that looked equally as awkward. From that point, it was basically Bianca carrying the bulk of the action. Asuka misted Kyrie in the face, which didn't even register a reaction from the crowd. I don't even know if most people were paying attention at that point. Bianca whipping Asuka with a braid got a big pop. But there were a bunch of clunky six-way spots at the very end. Finally, Jade pinned Dakota with that double chicken wing move that she used to use in AEW as her finish. That looked okay. The rest of her stuff? Ugh. Kind of shaky. I don't know, man. I really don't. I've been preaching for years now that I don't think Jade's cut out for this business. And I don't know how much longer we really need to run this experiment before we come to realize that it's swimming upstream without a paddle. They can try and try and try and try all they want with her. I mean, she could train for the next 12 years if she wants to. She looks like a beast. She's got a great look for Hollywood. But as a pro wrestler, man. I mean, how long do you stay patient with her until you realize it's beating a dead horse? I can admire the willingness to work with somebody and see their progress through to the end. But the thing with Jade is she's so raw and so green and so behind schedule of where she should reasonably be by this point in her career. And I'm not even trying to be a hard ass about it because I want her to succeed. I really would like for her to be the next breakout female star for this company. Rhea's not going to be around forever. But she's got to be able to back it up in the ring. She's got to be on that same level as somebody like a Rhea Ripley. And she is so far from reaching that pinnacle, you got to wonder if she's ever going to get there. I hesitate to say yes. I'd love to see her get there. But if this is all she has to show for it after how long she's been doing this, fuck, man. It's hard to stay positive about it. But then we come to the real spectacle on this night one. It wasn't Gunther and Brock. It was arguably better than Gunther and Brock. I don't know if it was Plan B or Plan C or even Plan D or Plan E. But wherever it fell in the planning stages, I'm glad they went through with it. The Intercontinental Championship match with Gunther defending against Sami Zayn. They were doing everything in their power to get you to believe that this was the night. This was Sami's crowning achievement. After everything that went down last year in Montreal when Sami couldn't take down the big dog in his hometown, failing to capture the Universal title in front of his wife and his kid, his friends and family, all those fans. Now, here we are a year later. Sammy's opportunity to win singles gold on a big stage in front of his wife and kid. It's not the Universal title, but it is a title that's been currently held for 2 years by Gunther, or at least somewhere in the ballpark of 2 years, maybe a little less than that. They said 666 days. So it is less than 2 years. All right, my bad. Apparently I can't do mental math. Sue me. I mean, there was a part of me that battled with the idea of whether or not this should be the point they do the title change. There have only been a couple occasions along the way where I thought, if they are going to end the title reign, maybe this guy would be a safe bet. That Raw match with Chad Gable last year, that would be a great example of that. There will be people that argue this wasn't the right time to do it. I can maybe understand the argument, but I'm okay with it here. Just because of the environment and the way it was done. There was nothing contrived about the way this was set up. And I'll tell you, man, the real star of this thing was Sammy's wife. She showed more passion at ringside here than the crowd did through the majority of this fucking show. Hats off to her. The moments where they captured her reactions to Sammy getting beaten into powder, Gunther standing there in the ring smiling and soaking in the booze. That's some heavy shit, dude. It's classic pro wrestling is what it is. Even if she was smartened up a little bit here, it doesn't matter. Because they did a great job making those moments count. And the best part, didn't need to kill themselves with flips and stunts to make it work. Now, these guys are the perfect match to go at it with each other. Gunther could be the dominant heel bully. Sammy could sell his ass off and work the fans' emotions from beginning to end. Yeah, they were laying into each other with the slaps. Gunther's chest was very red and swollen by the end of it. But even the slap exchanges and the chops had impact. They weren't just no-selling shit back and forth like you see in every AEW match where you could tell they're obviously cooperating with each other. Again, both guys look great. Sammy firing up at the end and refusing to stay down after all that punishment Gunther put him through. The multiple chops, the splashes. And I have no idea what you call that brainbuster that Sammy did to Gunther in the corner. That was the goddamnedest thing I've ever seen. How in the fuck he didn't break Gunther's neck on that spot, I'll never know. And if Sammy wasn't so freaking strong, I'm convinced that would have been the end of Gunther's career. The amount of strength it takes to lift a guy overhead like that and basically drop him from a standing position where Sammy can land on his feet. I have no idea how Gunther didn't die. I hope we never see that move again, because I don't need to see that on a constant basis. But for capturing a Mania moment, that was insane. I've never seen anything like that before. And then, of course, it leads to the haluva kick in the corner a few seconds later. Sammy crawls over, drapes the arm over Gunther's chest. 1, 2, 3. Big pop for the title switch. Awesome moment capture with Sammy's wife watching at ringside. I mean, I'll be frank. Up to this point, this was the first match in the card that I would consider a WrestleMania-like environment. And that's the Art of a Sami Zayn match. And if you're following in my weekly retro NXT reports right now, we're kind of living the Sami Zayn story as we speak. He's absolutely mastered the ability to draw people into his matches solely based on the raw emotion and drama. He can get his ass kicked for 15 minutes, make the miraculous comeback of the decade. People throw babies in the air. And nobody does it like Sammy. Again, whether or not you want to debate this was the right booking call, I kind of see it as them capitalizing on a big moment. They knew Sammy was going to be over. They knew it would get a massive reaction if they went through with the title change. I can't really sit here and say it was the wrong call because it absolutely worked for the Philly crowd. The alternative is you keep the belt on Gunther for longer, and then what? You maybe contemplate a title-for-title feud with him and Cody that I was kind of fantasy booking in my head a while back. I mean, you could still do Gunther and Cody for the Universal title, and that is absolutely something I foresee them maybe doing as early as SummerSlam this year. So I can't poon the decision to have Gunther drop the strap. It was going to happen eventually. You may as well go through with it before, God forbid, something were to happen where you had to vacate the title from Gunther for whatever reason. Be it an injury or whatever freak accident. I mean, the guy's a smart worker, but you never know these days. People get hurt so often. I'm always on pins and needles when I'm watching today's product, wondering when the next catastrophe is going to happen. It's just kind of the nature of where we are in today's business. But this was absolutely my favorite match on night one. No question. Took a heck of a long time to get there, but they finally made it worth my while. However, we're not done. Got one match to talk about here. It was the biggest tag team match of all time. The match that would determine the stipulation for night 2, with Cody versus Roman for the Universal Championship. Is it a straight one-on-one match with no outside swerves or interference? Or is it Bloodline Rules? AKA Cody's fuck 6 ways from Sunday. Well, after everything that went down here, you could probably contend the stipulations never mattered all that much to begin with. Because whenever Rock's involved, it's always Bloodline Rules. At least that's the story they depicted here. So where to begin? Cody Rhodes and Seth Prancin Rollins versus Rock and Roman Reigns. I didn't really put that over like Samantha Irvin did during her ring intros. Okay, serious question here. Why do people like Samantha Irvin's announcing? Because she belches into the microphone and sounds like she's giving herself a hernia? That shit sucked when Justin Roberts was doing it over a decade ago. That's all Samantha Irvin is. She's Justin Roberts with a vagina. I don't get it, man. I hate the loud screaming announcers. It's so goddamn annoying. Just be a fucking normal broadcast announcer. Introduce the names, don't draw attention to yourself, and get out of the ring. Just be better than Reese or Bowden. That's the only qualification. There's a counterbalance there. But yeah, the big showdown. Well, they were in Philly. It's smarter fan territory, yes. So you knew there were going to be a lot of anti-Cody fans in attendance. The boos were definitely channeling. I will not lie when I say it was a very pro-Rocky crowd. Even though Raw got some boos as well, they were not as prevalent as the Cody boos were. They booed Roman. They booed Seth very sparingly. Whenever he wasn't in there working with Rock. They were very evenly split on Cody, depending on whether or not he was working with Rock. That was probably the biggest takeaway from this in terms of listening to the crowd and how they responded to both teams. It actually kind of took me out of it for a while because that pessimistic side of me started worrying about how that would translate over to night 2. It's like, oh shit. Is Cody going to get railroaded by the Philly crowd and booed out of the building when he wins the title? We'll get to that. I don't want to jump ahead too far. Here's what I'll say about the match. The biggest complaint I know people are going to have about it is that it went way too long. And it did go very long. I think when you remove the entrances and all the opening fanfare, the match from bell to bell was 44 minutes? 45 minutes? Some ridiculous number like that. Yeah, that was a little much. Even for this caliber of star power. It's one thing to take your time and really build up to the climactic moments, but you can do that shit in under 30. Come on now. The show was already pushing hour 3 by this point anyway. Do we really need to devote the entire final hour to this one match, counting all the intros and everything? Some of us have lives, So with that said, the match was a little long for my taste. But out of everybody involved, I thought Rock was the fucking highlight of this thing. He was awesome in this match. I know some people were skeptical about the idea of him working a long Mania match, thinking he might not be able to go that long and he'll get blown up midway through. I hope this finally put that conversation to bed. And yes, there was a good amount of crowd brawling around the midway point. And I know that's where the conversation is going to come up about them completely killing the stipulation for night 2 when Rock just flat out told the official, if you count us out, you're fired. I'm The Rock, damn it. I don't fuck around. So, in essence, why the hell would the stipulation matter for night 2 then? If Rock can just say, don't follow the rules of this match or you're fired. Even if Cody and Seth won here, and it would allegedly make the Cody-Roman title match a fair fight the following night, Rock just flat out told the official, yeah, I know, but I can change that on the fly because I'm on the board. So, he could have just made it bloodline rules regardless of who won or lost this match. Didn't really make sense. But they needed to do something here to kind of break up the monotony. The match up to that point was kind of one note. Wrestling was okay, but it kind of needed a second gear to it. Just having Rock do all of his nostalgia spots was going to run dry eventually, especially given how long they were having this go. So the stuff with the split screen, the stuff with the crowd brawling, I was okay with it. Didn't overstay its welcome. They eventually brought it back to the ring. And it did get to a point as the match went on where they kind of reverted back to that old formula of the spam big move kick out, spam big move kick out. Didn't get completely ridiculous here, but there was an element of resorting to that a little too much. But they did a great job milking the sequences where Cody had the visual pins on Roman, where he hit Roman with the crossroads and Rock pulled the official out of the ring to save him. That was a good moment. That sweet but overly telegraphed spot where Roman went to try to spear Cody, but Seth came in and tackled Cody out of the way so Roman would inadvertently spear Rock. That got the biggest pop of the entire fucking match. The way Rock sold that, his ribs just got turned inside out. Haven't seen Rock sell a spear like that since the Goldberg days. There was the double pedigree spot that they gave the heels a minute later where they went for duplicate pins on Rock and Roman. That was kind of hokey. I didn't really like that. Rock getting put to the announcer's table got a big reaction. But it all basically led to the spot at the end where Cody's in there alone with Roman. Oh, by the way, side note here. Cody needs to retire the springboard cutter. He did it like 3 times in this match. It always looked horrendous. Never looks good when he does it. He fucks it up 99% of the time. It's just a bad move. It needs to go away. It sucked when John Cena did it, and it sucks when Cody does it. But they have Cody hit Roman with a series of crossroads, and right as he's going for the third one, that's when you see him back toward the rope so Rock can reach in and whip Cody in the back with a weight belt. From there was a pretty telegraphed finish. Roman spears Cody, but he gives Rock the tag so he can come in and finish the job. Gives Cody the rock bottom, the subsequent people's elbow. Doing business the old-fashioned way here in 2024, baby. Cody's going over on night 2. You got to take the piss out of the room the night before by making sure Rock gets one over on him. That's that veteran instinct kicking in. The old, that doesn't work for me, brother business. So, of course, Rock gets the W here. And I wasn't angry about it because I kind of saw that coming. Even before the whole finishing sequence. Like, even when they first booked the match, my first inclination was, yeah, Rock's probably going over. Sure enough, I'm more or less surprised they beat Cody, but, I mean, I guess you kind of had to, right? You know, Seth has to defend against Drew the following night. You don't want to beat Seth twice in back-to-back nights. Roman winning here doesn't really accomplish much because we've already seen him pin Cody. You need to do something a little more heat-heavy to carry over into the following night. So I think Rock getting the pinfall was probably the best option. Overall, here's what I would say about it. There were pockets of great moments here. It had certain stages where you could pinpoint, that's a WrestleMania moment right there, or that was a WrestleMania moment there. But as an overall package, I wasn't really blown away, honestly. Rock looked phenomenal. I mean, he's still one of the greatest of all time, no question about that. Even if I haven't been the biggest fan of the presentation of The Rock in the last 10 or so years. I mean, heel Rock is by far the best audible they've called in this storyline. Even better than going back to the original game plan of Cody and Roman for the title after Punk got hurt. Like, remember they were briefly contemplating doing Cody and Seth for the world title and Roman and Rock as the main event on night 2. No, heel Rock has been a boatload of fun. His interactions with Cody, the promos, the packages, everything they've done with heel Rock has been amazing. Best decision they made along the way. At the end of the day, though, what do you call this match? It was just kind of window dressing to set up the real blow-off the following night. Now, they certainly did a lot to tease some stuff with the bloodline here. But I think after the match was over, the people were just kind of ready to call it a night. Because it was already late as it was. And before I jump into night 2, let me just kind of wrap up my thoughts here. You know, when night 1 ended, I woke up the next day and saw a lot of people kind of thought the show was underwhelming. A little disappointing. I don't know. I didn't really have all that high of expectations to begin with. So maybe I just wasn't as upset as other people were. Outside the Sammy Gunther match and bits and pieces of the main event. Yeah, I'd agree most of night 1 was mediocre. But again, I'm judging it on a scale based on my low anticipations. But it left night 2 up in the air. They kind of needed a turnaround and send the Philly home happier than they left on night 1. Bad weather aside. So let's see if they did that. And as we move into night 2 of this weekend extravaganza, that's where I realized I watched a lot of wrestling this weekend. I probably watched more wrestling on just Saturday and Sunday than I have in the entire year of 2024 so far. And when you count both nights of Mania, plus Retro Raw and Retro NXT, in addition to me starting to watch some of that next NWA Crockett show, which we will discuss on Friday. Yeah. That's a lot of fucking wrestling. A lot of it was bad. But it is a lot of wrestling nonetheless. But this is where it counted, baby. Night 2. All centered around one thing. It's the night Cody Rhodes finishes the story. It's the night he brings home the gold and wins the belt that they took from his daddy in the garden. The 2-year journey finally comes to a head. At least that's what you're cautiously optimistic in seeing. You know, after all the time and energy they put into this bloodline story over the last how many years, you were hoping for a satisfying payoff. I'm going to share my eventual thoughts on that match. I have some mixed bag opinions there. But I will say, before we get into the card here, Night 1 was pretty unanimously viewed as a major disappointment. It lacked a lot of true, meaningful WrestleMania moments. Aside from Sammy winning the title from Gunther, there just wasn't anything on that show that gave you the impression it was WrestleMania. No legends, a lack of impactful moments, and a main event that kind of left you sour headed into night 2. You know, at least they bothered to show the Hall of Fame inductees on night 2. By the end of it, they at least attempted to steer course and provide you with those classic expected WrestleMania moments. Well, I can tell you who I didn't expect to see make an appearance at WrestleMania. Factoring in all the celebrities and the potential big names that could have potentially shown up for the annual nostalgia trips. Stephanie McMahon. Yeah, that was unexpected. And when she resigned from her co-executive position last year, I'd have thought we were never going to see Stephanie back in any physical capacity in WWE. With all the Vince allegations, I mean, I'd have thought she'd have washed her hands with this company. But no. She is back to advocate for the Paul Levesque era of WWE. So at least she's endorsing her husband. God, you could tell the Philly crowd was fighting back the urge to boo her. They're like, fuck. This broad. Well, at least she's not running major branches of the company anymore. We'll probably never see her again after this. So sure, we'll kindly applaud. But she did the similar intro that Hunter did the night prior. Did a horrible DX build-up, and then it was pretty much on with the show. And we open night 2 with the World Heavyweight Championship match. What easily wound up being my favorite segment of not just night 2, but at the entire WrestleMania as a whole. Drew McIntyre challenging Seth Prancing, Dancing Goofball Rollins. And my God, dude. If you think goof is an apropos term for Seth Rollins after the treatment he got this year, we might need to go to the dictionary to drum up some more synonyms. This guy got ass fucked. Big time. Oh, yeah, and CM Punk was just magically out there as the fourth wheel commentator. No entrance. No special fanfare. No Mussolini. Just, hey, here's CM Punk. Kind of a lame way to introduce such a big name. I mean, I'd have rather seen them milk Punk's entrance if it meant I didn't have to sit through whatever the hell that Seth Rollins intro was supposed to be. You know, Punk sitting there on commentary calling him a goof the whole time. Wasn't the only person Punk was calling a goof in the last week or two. But, I mean, he wasn't wrong. The guy looked fucking ridiculous. Whoever co-signed that attire should have been immediately fired without notice. Getting past my revulsion for whatever in the hell Seth's gimmick is supposed to be. I still don't know after all these years. I said at the top here, this ended up being my favorite segment of the night. Keyword being segment. A lot of that having to do with the afterbirth. As a match, Drew and Seth, it all kind of trickles back to what I was saying earlier about my complaints with a lot of modern wrestling presentation these days. And the way they lay out these big matches. I'll go back to everything I said about the Rhea Ripley-Becky Lynch match the night prior. I mean, if you're into this kind of match where both guys hit their finishers back and forth over and over and kick out multiple times, no sell a bunch of shit 5 seconds after taking a move, you probably liked it a lot more than I did. To me, it just kind of followed the status quo modern booking formula. How many Claymore kicks did Drew give to Seth in this match? I think I counted like 4 or 5. The first of which happened in the opening 3 seconds. I mean, they totally killed Drew's finish. And they done such a rotten job making the Drew-Seth program mean anything. It was always about Drew and Punk. Seth was just a placeholder guy here to drop the belt to Drew and then set up everything that was going to happen after the fact. The champion was the biggest non-factor in all this. And the biggest problem I've always had with Seth Rollins, even though the guy's a very talented athlete and can do a lot of impressive stuff in the ring, remove the character aspect for a minute, the guy's never learned how to sell shit properly. Remember that story they were working a while back where Rollins allegedly had a bad back? Yet he was still doing all his dive spots and superplexes and all the high-risk offense where he kept landing right on his supposed bad back. Like here, they kept drawing attention to his right knee. He was sort of in and out of the selling stages where he'd work the injury for a little bit. Then he'd have to do a move, so he'd completely neglect the knee. Then he'd go back to selling it a minute later. There was no psychology to it. To me, this has always been Seth's biggest drawback as a talent. Even when I go back and watch footage of him from Ring of Honor years ago, he's never really been good at that aspect of the business. Unless he was hurt for real, he doesn't know how to sell. It always looks phony. But that's really what the match was overall. Drew's a great arrogant prick. But when you look at everything in a vacuum, up until Drew finally won with the Claymore after his 7th attempt or whatever it was, the match was just kind of a standard move spam showcase. Not my cup of tea, dog. Never has been. Especially now that everybody's doing it. Men and women alike. Because they've been taught that this is the proper way to do big fight matches. Just hit your finish 17 times in a row until you finally win after the 18th attempt. So the finish to this, Seth curb stomps Drew on the announce table. Then less than a minute later, he's rolled back into the ring, at which point, Drew just catches Seth with a claymore, gets a near fall, then he hits it again, and he pins him. So stupid. Nobody knows how to age in a match anymore. However, let's talk about the real thing that mattered in all this. My favorite part of WrestleMania XL. And of course, it's fucking CM Punk that steals the show. My man. So Drew's celebrating after he wins. He's very emotional about the title win. And they're obviously playing up the story that this is the first time he won a major world title outside the Scamdemic era when there were no fans. So it's a big moment for Drew. But the guy just can't help himself. He sees Punk over at the commentary desk. You can tell Punk is gritting his teeth and fighting back anger as he has to sit there and watch Drew pose with the belt. Finally, you see Drew climb on top of the announce desk and get right in Punk's face with the title. They're arguing back and forth. I believe Punk's quote was something to the effect of, "I can't hear you. I've got sound filters in." But the payoff is Drew spitting in Punk's face. And at that point, Punk's had enough of the blatant disrespect. He doesn't take that shit, brother. So he sideswipes Drew and cuts him off the knees, takes off the elbow brace and starts laying into Drew with it, just pounding on him and giving Drew that well-deserved receipt. All the trolling, all the disrespect, all the horrible stuff Drew said and done to Punk along the road, it all came to a head here. And that poor old sap Drew McIntyre, he forgot about one guy, the ultimate difference maker in this equation, as did Punk. Although it worked in Punk's favor, clearly. Damian Priest is still the Money in the Bank holder. And man, when they played the Judgment Day's music and Priest comes running down the rampway with that briefcase, this place went insane. They erupted for this. And you see Punk just standing there with a big old grin on his face because he knows what's about to go down. Sure enough, Priest cashes in the briefcase. Samantha Irvin does a horrible job announcing it because she's fighting back tears. As you'll see later on, this will become a recurring theme, and it was very annoying. Perfect argument for why there should never be female ring announcers. But Priest throws McIntyre back in, plants him with a South of Heaven chokeslam. 1, 2, 3. Crowd fucking explodes in their pants. I was laughing the whole time. By far, the best reactions from the commentary team. Michael Cole into the headset goes, "Holy sh..." There's a slight pause. And then you just hear Pat McAfee deadpan go, "Shit!" That is where I lost it. Man, I don't know. The amount of profanity being uttered on these shows, I'm starting to wonder if that's going to blow up in their face. People just dropping F-bombs and saying shit every 2 minutes. I mean, I thought I was bad when it came to that stuff. It's like I was watching an episode of Dynamite. This is a WWE Premium Live special. The announcers are just cussing up a storm for the entire 4-hour window. As were the boys. Oh, God. We'll talk about Rock in that main event. But while the heels are celebrating on the top of the ramp, Punk's doing the slow round of applause for Drew being a fuck-up. McAfee again just goes, well, this sucks. It was fucking phenomenal. I don't care if I was supposed to feel sympathy for Drew in this case. Fuck that noise. He screwed up. He got in Punk's face. And he got a proper receipt. Priest capitalized on said screw up. Punk was just there to inflict salt in the wound, brother. Now, you want to talk about WrestleMania moments. This was a fucking WrestleMania moment, big dog. I won't ever forget this shit. And it is a great story if you think about it. Punk got his revenge on Drew without needing to get a match sanctioned. All he had to do was let Drew be an out-of-control narcissist. And he knew eventually it would come back to bite him in the rear. That's the sweetest kind of redemption you can get. When you barely have to lift a finger, you just let the guy slip on his own banana peel, so to speak. And because Drew's a heel, makes everything work. Yeah, you get to see him win his first major world title in front of fans. But in the bigger scope of things, he let his ego get the better of him. And you know when we see these guys face off next time, Punk is not going to let Drew live that down. The level of sarcasm incoming, it'll be too much to handle. So I absolutely love this. Everything about it. My man, 2 Mil Phil, stealing the show just like we knew he would. Fuck the haters. And after that brilliant segment, there wasn't any way I was sticking around to get lulled back into a coma with this 6-man street fight with a bunch of guys I don't care about. Cross in the AOP versus Lashley and the Street Profits. Philly street fight. No thanks. I'm good. I used this match to go make myself dinner. I didn't want to ruin the moment we just captured in the previous 5 minutes. I mean, I've hated just about everything they've done with this dead-in-the-water feud from the moment it started. I kind of figured it would end up going this direction where they try to cram everybody into a 6-man. The street fight was just kind of thrown in there as a stipulation to yet again pop the Philly crowd. So I came back in the room right as the babyfaces were putting Cross through a table and pinning him. Hopefully that means the feud is over and they can move everybody else on. And for Cross, that means a one-way ticket to the Federal Witness Protection Program. Because that guy needs to go away and disappear for a while if they have any faith of saving his career. It was good to see Bubba Ray, though. So that brought us to AJ Styles versus LA Knight. Yeah. This is another feud they were building up on SmackDown for a while. And I gotta be honest, even though I kind of figured this was the eventual game plan for Mania, I wouldn't say I was ever really excited for the idea of this match. I like both guys, but I don't know, there was just something that never clicked with the way they had focused on this feud on television. I missed a lot of the stuff with Knight supposedly showing up at AJ's house. Whatever pre-tapes they shot with that. I didn't see any of it, so I don't know what was going on there. A lot of it, I think, was them just trying to give LA Knight something to do. because they deviated from the initial idea of having him and Logan Paul wrestle for the IC title. At least that's where I thought the next logical step was for Knight. With that all said, this is really good too. I enjoyed this match. Probably a lot more than most people did. But I don't care. For the kind of wrestling I like, without them having to revert to near-fall spams and non-stop finishing moves for 15 minutes, they just went back and forth and beat the piss out of each other. It was intense. It had energy. The crowd was into it. Both guys brought their A game for this. I'd probably argue it was LA Knight's best singles match to date. Especially when you look at marquee pay-per-view level matches. I did note the blatant DDT spot that Knight called right in front of the floor cam. That was a big what the fuck moment. But I think it ended up being a lot better than most people anticipated. It was a very grassroots, traditional professional wrestling match with a little bit of modern stuff sprinkled in. But again, it never reached the point of absurdity where they were just endlessly kicking out of each other's finishers. You had the story of AJ trying to pick apart the knee of Knight. You had flurries of big spots that they actually built up to. Everything was done for a reason. Knight going over, I thought, was obviously the right call. Beating AJ is not going to hurt him at this stage in the game. Knight absolutely needed this win. Got a great reaction when he hit that BFT on AJ. And, I don't know what their plans are for Knight in the long term. The guy's obviously a huge talent. I just don't foresee them ever going anywhere with him beyond the upper mid-card. The guy's already, 39 years old? He ain't getting any younger. Pretty soon they might not have those same opportunities to elevate him above where he is right now. Age drawbacks, physical conditioning. That's all going to be a factor when the company is considering the value of LA Knight past the age of 40. I hope they actually capitalize on this, and they try to keep the momentum going, because the people still like the guy. He's still over. Despite all the ups and downs he's been through in the last few years. They can still rectify it if they want to. So we'll see. Overall, very good match. These guys are pros. They've been around the block. They know what they're doing. But I think this is more about the aftermath and how they proceed with LA Knight going into the summer. So then we come to the three-way for the United States title. Logan Paul defending against Kevin Owens and Randy Orton. The match that should have been Logan versus Randy until they fucked it up by throwing KO's bum-looking ass in there. I like KO for the record. I'm just pissed they had to make this a three-way when it didn't have to be. If you follow my channel, you know what my thoughts are on multi-mans. I hate them. I think they're way too overexposed in today's product. Most of the time, I find they're just lame excuses to try to book more bodies on a card. Which is pretty much why they shoehorned Owens into this thing. I'm not a particular fan of the two babyfaces getting to work over the one heel story. Kind of makes it hard to cheer for anybody when the protagonists outnumber the so-called villains. So there was a lot going into this that I wasn't particularly fond of. And as soon as they rang the bell for this thing, and I look out on the floor and I see that numbnut dressed in the Prime Drink costume, I just can't focus on the match for large chunks of it. Because I'm so distracted waiting for whatever this idiot's going to do. Because you knew he was going to get involved. Why else would he be conspicuously standing out there drawing attention to himself the whole time? Sure enough, Turned out to be some internet celebrity that only like 15% of the audience knew of. A streamer. Yeah, it's apparently a real profession out there. Basically, here's what you had going on in this match. You had Orton and Owens taking turns working over Paul until they evidently started teasing dissension with each other. Then it kind of turned into a modern three-way where you had two guys doing spots in the ring. The other guy would sort of hide out on the floor and wait for his time to come in. They tried to keep it mildly entertaining when the babyfaces were going after Logan and making him look like a jackass. But even that started to wear thin after a few minutes. Eventually you get the thing where the Prime guy pulled Logan out to the floor and got in Randy's face and was subsequently killed by getting dropped with an RKO on the announce desk. It also had every multi-man finish you've ever seen in the last 15 years. Stop me if you've heard this before. A guy hits his finish, but the guy who is hanging out on the floor runs in at the last minute to steal the win. Unheard of. Could you get any more uncreative in today's wrestling climate? Now, lame finish aside, Logan Paul retaining wasn't all that shocking. Of course, Orton wasn't doing the job. That's probably why they slotted KO into the mix. Got to make sure you protect those young lions. You know, Randy Orton doing a job this early into his career, that's only going to hurt him. Again, I'd have rather seen the one-on-one match with Logan and Randy if it was going to be the alternative to Logan and Knight. The triple threat stuff is just so played out. You're not breaking any new boundaries with these kinds of matches. I mean, every spot and story has been already explored in these things. Now everybody's just trying to replicate the exact same match over and over again. I mean, it wasn't bad. I mean, the three guys involved are obviously good workers. Logan Paul was way too good considering how short his tenure's been in this business. You know, at least it didn't devolve into a spot fest like a lot of multi-mans do. I just really wasn't blown away by it. They could have done better. It was a serviceable title match to give Logan a win and move him on to something else. I don't know what that something else is. Hopefully LA Knight. Guess we got to tune into SmackDown to see. So what was next? I completely got lost in my notes here. Let's see. No, we covered the triple threat. Here we go. Girls match. Io and Bayley for the other belt. I don't know what it's called. Women's Championship, World Women's Championship, who cares? By the way, this is where I had completely had it with Samantha Irvin. She annoyed the piss out of me with her overacting. Not just on this show, but the night prior. This company is going so out of their way to prop this woman up as an all-time great ring announcer. She fucking sucks. I don't care what anybody says. Her grunting is annoying. Her fake accent is dumb as fuck. The way she clenches her fist and looks like she's trying to fight back an orgasm. I hate her. It's like, just the fact that they're going out of their way to tell me that I should like her, it makes me loathe her that much more. God. So the match. I said I was going to give it a chance. I'm a fan of both talents. More so Bayley than Io. You know, but I figured they were going to have Bayley win the strap here, so I was curious to see how they were going to go about booking it. They've been talking about how this is a big moment for Bayley's career. Last time I think she won a major singles championship in WWE was, did they say 2021? Might not seem like that long. I mean, when you think about the amount of times they needlessly put the belt on that overrated botch fest Charlotte, Christ, 3 years may as well be 3 decades. But it had story. We've been following the breakup of Damage Control on TV. They haven't been my favorite segments to watch, but it is something they've been building up for a while. And Bayley's always had that natural ability to gain sympathy whenever she's being disrespected or outshined by her comrades. Even though she's basically been a heel for years, the people have that respect for her as a talent. So this was a very organic way to flip her face and move her away from the heel work she'd been previously doing. I thought they did a nice job working the story of Bayley's knee injury after she came up favoring it during the dive spot early on. One can only hope she was working it. Of course, you never know. But EO was good at staying in control and getting the heat on Bayley. Took their time milking the big comeback moments. Every time Bayley tried to catch EO with a surprise, the knee would always buckle or she wouldn't be able to capitalize on pin attempts, not being quick enough to respond. When I look back at it, the match didn't really go all that long. Bell to bell, I think it was 12, 13 minutes? That might still seem lengthy depending on your personal preference. I mean, in 1988, that would have been an eternity. 2024, that's top of the hour TV main event, at least. But they packed in all the action they needed to. Big spot at the end was Bayley making her miraculous comeback after Io kept trying for a couple moonsault attempts. Then Bayley fired up, hit the big Macho Man elbow drop, set her up for that Rose Plant Dillia Bob, which, still not really a fan of that move. It's different. It looks very convoluted to set up. But she gets the W. Clean victory. Crowd went nuts for that. This actually had a very similar atmosphere to the Gunther-Sammy match the night prior. Being that it was more about the crowd environment and the total investment into wanting to see Bayley win. Maybe it wasn't the greatest match in the world from start to finish, but the people were absolutely dead set on Bayley winning it. Not a single fan in that crowd was sitting down when Bayley got the pin. It was another pleasant surprise. I figured the match would be good, but it ended up being a lot better than I thought it would be. And again, the crowd helped there. I mean, they sucked for the majority of both nights, but they had their moments when they were into shit. And this is one of them. A big moment for Bayley. Another satisfying blow-off to a long-standing feud. And another sizable thumbs up for the WrestleMania 2 card. Or Night 2 card. And, yeah. Looking back, I wound up watching all 3 girls' matches, factoring in both nights. The 6-woman tag, I was sort of in and out during certain periods. I wasn't really tuned in from start to finish. But again, when you present the top girls to me and you get rid of all the Barbie filler in the middle, I'll give it a chance. I don't automatically dismiss women's wrestling because they're women. I dismiss a lot of women's wrestling because a lot of it sucks. It's a shame I have to wait until WrestleMania every year to actually find a decent pair of girls that are worth my time watching. But here we are. They found the magic creamer. By the way, I had to point this out. Totally random thought that just occurred to me. I love Pat McAfee marking out for random celebrities all throughout the show. And of course, I have no idea who any of these people are. So like, they do all the cameo shots and everything. Pat's like, "Oh my God, it's famous rapper T. Diddy." And I'm sitting there like, I don't know who that is. Why are we yelling? I also don't care. That makes it that much funnier. Apologies if I just peeked the mic there. I'm trying to be cognizant of that. I'm still working around some settings on this new microphone. It is very sensitive. But we have now come to the grand finale. The cinematic climax. The road to glory for Mr. Cody finally reaches ahead. It has been a 2-year journey. A long 2-year journey. After failing to capture the gold last year against a lot of people's better judgment, they took a big risk in prolonging it for another year. People were very much back and forth about that booking call. And now it's time to put that theory to the test. Was it worth the wait? In the 24 hours prior, they left you with that teaser that Cody was going to be fighting an uphill battle from the jump. He and Seth lost the match to Roman and Rock. It's bloodline rules. Cody fighting everybody, basically. So they're stacking the deck against them. Doing everything to make you believe there's no chance Cody can finish the story. Keep that bloodline rule stipulation on tap for a second. By the way, I love the totally fake-ass orchestra plans for Roman's entrance. Like Cole trying to sell me that it was an actual live performance. Yeah. Yes, a percussion section of an orchestra with a timpani player, a tam-tam player, and a marching snare drummer. Not a concert snare drummer, but a marching snare drummer. Then when the actual music starts, the only percussion that you hear playing is a full functioning drum set. Fuck you. Don't ever lie to me and say that it was a real performance when it's not. That offends me as a semi-pro musician. I went to school for that shit. The Asian chick on the timpani didn't even have the right mallets. Piss off. So when it comes to my overall take with this spectacle, we'll call it, and that really is the best way I can describe it, where do I stand with it all? Did I love it? Did I hate it? Will I be the one single wrestling fan in existence that takes issue with the so-called formatting of this main event? Well, hear me out for a minute. I hated this match. Hated it. With a passion. But I love the end result. And before you jump down my neck with any irrational conclusions or try to run me up the flagpole here, again, let me try to systematically break all of this down. Because there was a lot to unpack with this. And this is where that battle between the psychology of sports entertainment versus pro wrestling comes into play. Let's not mince words here. This was a 100% complete WWE overbooked mess. Every single bit of smoke and mirrors you saw here, from the run-in angles to all the surprise entrances, everything that transpired in the middle of this thing, it is everything that I despise about the modern presentation of wrestling, where it's so over-the-top stagey and so excessively choreographed to a T. It's really hard to suspend your disbelief with this shit. The best example I can think of, and I'm jumping way ahead here, but bear with me for a minute because I'll explain more of what happened as we break down the bullet points. You know, after they do all their nostalgia run-ins with Rock and Cena and Rollins in the Shield gear, there are all these bodies strewn around ringside. Solo Sikoa's out there at one point. And it all leads to the blackout in the arena where we hear Undertaker's gong. I make no bones about it. He's still my all-time favorite. And yes, I legitimately marked out for that shit too. Even though I should know better, at my ripe, grumpy, old, cynical age of 35. But the whole thing's fucking ridiculous. Because when the lights come back on, Taker's in there doing the face-off with Rock. He chokeslams him. The lights go out again. They come back on. Everybody else has vanished. Cena's vanished. Rollins has vanished. Solo has vanished. Rock has vanished. Everyone's just fucking gone. Discount Cody and Roman. There's no explanation for where anybody went. They just disappeared into the ether. They made their cameo appearances. And then they left. And I guess as a casual fan, you're supposed to get so caught up in the wow factor of, holy fuck, it's Taker and Rock in 2024. What a moment! Yet the only thing I keep asking after everything goes down, where did everybody else go? And again, never explained. Never addressed by the announcers. It was like none of those people ever existed. We were now in a parallel universe. It was a total WWE move. God, you used to see this crap all the time in years past. Especially during the height of when Vince had completely lost his mind and just went batshit crazy. Like, this became normalized. You'd see this stuff all the time and you'd be like, yeah, well, kind of to be expected. And again, it's that kind of old school WWF, WWE booking where I'm like, come on now, really? What are we doing? Can we not pay attention to detail a little bit here? Nobody called this into question in the meeting when they were putting this together. Nobody raised their hand and was like, oh, well, hold on a second. These people are just going to kind of disappear and we're not going to explain any of it? Apparently so. Because they think you are an idiot and that you won't bring it up. Well, I brought it up. And here's the other thing, too. All of that completely overshadowed anything Roman and Cody did for the previous 20 minutes. And this is where the whole stupidity of the bloodline rules thing comes in. It's essentially no DQ, anything goes, right? Okay. So why the fuck did Solo and Jimmy and Rock wait until over midway through the match to help Roman? Think about it. If they really wanted Roman to retain the belt here, why didn't they just hit the ring from the opening bell? Ghetto stomp the shit out of Cody. Rock bottom, spear, spike, 1, 2, 3. Be done with it. Huh? Anybody want to try to justify that one? No, instead, it is a straight one-on-one match where you get sporadic layered run-ins from the bloodline, only for them to be cut off by some babyface that they had beef with along the way. Of course, it's even made more absurd by the fact that every layered run-in had a fucking theme back in it. Like the producers apparently knew these guys were coming out. Again, you see how fucking stupid this is? You see how it's impossible to suspend disbelief about any of it? You get Jay spearing Jimmy off the rampway through 2 tables that were plainly set up for literally that spot. Again, very stagey and very hokey. You get this stuff where Solo comes in and cuts off Cody when he tries to go for the crossroads on Roman. And it's Solo and Roman doing the 2-on-1 beatdown until Super Cena makes the triumphant return so he can run down the rampway and take out Solo. I use run loosely because, well, cardio has never been Cena's strong suit. Then you get Rock's music playing, and he comes down motherfucking and goddamn and everything. Apparently Rock's gimmick now is that he's just Vince McMahon. The only thing missing was him coming out and blowing out his quads trying to slide into the ring. Seriously, the cursing on this show was out of control, dude. Rock in particular, he was the Tourette's guy on this fucking show. Insane. But he and Cena do the face-off. A little bit of nostalgia there from years past. Of course, Rock plants Cena with a rock bottom and kills him. That's when we get Taker's gong and all the stuff that happened there. Oh shit, I forgot about Rollins too. How could I forget about Rollins? It was actually pretty easy in hindsight. Because here's how they decided to factor Seth into all this. They play the old Shield theme music. At first, I thought, oh, great. Yeah, they're bringing back the oil mechanic Moxley to make a cameo. But instead, we see Rollins show up with a chair. He's got the old Shield gear on. Because apparently it was so important for Seth to make a run-in at the very end of the night. He had to make sure he changed outfits for a completely pointless run-in that served no purpose. Again, suspension of disbelief. And then as soon as Rollins hits the ring, bam, Superman punch from Roman. Seth is laid out like a fucking geek. I didn't even think the guy was in the camera shot before he got taken out. No joke. You hear the Shield music. They're kind of panning to the audience and you're looking around for the guy. They go back to the ring. Rock is standing there. From out of nowhere, Roman runs over and punches thin air. Then they put the camera on him and, well, there's the dead body of Seth. And you're like, oh yeah, that was indeed Seth. There he lay, sprawled out on the mat like a goddamn idiot. Oh my God. Are we sure that guy's contract hasn't expired? I hope he asked for a pay raise after the way they neutered him on this show. So from there, I don't even remember what happened. Somewhere in this mess, Cody and Roman were having a match. Kind of forget that's where we started. Not that it was very consequential to the overall scheme of what was happening. But the big culmination here is that after Taker disappears, along with the rest of the peanut gallery, you see Roman and Cody battling for a chair, and Roman makes the crucial mistake of turning his back on Cody to try to take out Seth one more time. He gives Seth the chair shot to the back, yet again making him look like a moron. And then as Roman sets up Cody for the spear in the corner, Cody catches him in the jaw with a boot, gives him 3 crossroads, and then it's 1, 2, 3. Cody gets the pinfall. The crowd nuts themselves in the next fall season. And we have indeed finished the story. 45 run-ins and 85 angles later. You know, there is so much I can say about the layout of this fiasco. And had the end result have been anything aside from Cody winning, this may have been the worst match of all time. It was just all the bad habits of the way WWE tries to lay out these big matches. With that said, they got to the right result. By golly, it was an overbooked clusterfuck of epic proportions. But they got there. And you get the big post-match celebration with all the baby faces emptying out from the locker room. Brandy's out there as support. You get Cody's family coming in. He eventually brings out Bruce Pritchard and Triple H as a special thanks for bringing him back to the company. And they spend, somewhere in the ballpark of like 15 minutes with all this. I mean, they had 6 hours blocked out on Peacock when you include the pre-show stuff. I think they still had like a half hour by the time the final bell sounded. I was like, are they really going to milk this title win for another half hour? I think they cut it short by like 10. But they put it over. Really sold it as a big moment for the company. And they're still preaching about this new era. And we'll see what that means in the end. But my God, this main event. I mean, I'm almost at a loss for words. Like I said, they got the belt off Roman. Can't really say the win for Cody came without a cause. I mean, really, if you want to get down to nuts and bolts, the story of Roman losing wasn't even because of anything Cody did. It was because he turned his attention to Seth for far too long and gave Cody enough time to recover. And it's kind of hard for me to even say this was a definitive win for Cody. A moral win, maybe. But after 3 years of Roman dominance, him beating everybody on the roster, and the payoff is Cody wins because of interference, smoke and mirrors, and Roman being an idiot for all of 2 minutes. I don't know, man. I'm a little hesitant to call this a rousing success. It's the skeptic in me talking. Gotta bear that in mind. I'm an old grumpy man here, but am I just not seeing what everybody else is? Are we all turning a blind eye to this because Cody won the belt? I love Cody. And I'm not saying I didn't want to see this finish. But I'm a little hesitant based on the way they booked all that. But we will see. They've closed the chapter on the Roman title reign. It's been a fun road, but I think we're ready for a change of pace a little bit. You got Cody at the helm as the new babyface champion, and sort of the company face, so to speak. I have to imagine Roman's going to go away for a while. I mean, I don't foresee him being around anytime soon. SummerSlam at the earliest, if I had to guess. But it freshens up the title picture. You know, Punk is still out for a while, but they got plenty of names to throw at Cody in the meantime. So there are positives. Don't get me wrong. I didn't hate the end result, because it absolutely was what needed to happen. Just everything that preceded it for the 30 minutes that I was just kind of iffy on. But that was WrestleMania 40. If there was ever a textbook case for why WrestleMania should never be 2 nights, this would be a great model. I mean, night 2, by and large, was a much better show than night 1. I think we can all agree on that. And if they would have taken night 2 of WrestleMania and kept it as is, maybe take the Gunther-Sammy match and put that on this show as well, definitely would have been one of the better WrestleManias I could recall in recent memory. You know, unfortunately, they had a bunch of other crap happen on night 1 that came nowhere close to reaching the level of night 2. And that's always kind of the problem when you're trying to judge these 2-night WrestleManias, because you want to try to combine it into an overall package, but this always kind of seems to be the case where you have a 2-night WrestleMania, one night is kind of meh, the other one's considerably better, but how do you rate it? It's just, there's too much skewing that goes on when you're trying to pinpoint whether or not it's an all-time great WrestleMania. 50% of it, you can maybe argue. The other 50%, not at all. And you'd be a fool to do so. And again, I could talk for another hour about the Cody Roman match, but I want to keep things rolling with the show because we got a lot of shit to talk about yet. I'm probably in the very slim minority of people that had a lot of questions and issues with the way that whole thing was done. I'll let you be the judge of that. You can admonish me and tell me how wrong I am. Tell me I'm out of touch. I don't care. But WrestleMania XL is in the book. And it is onward to whatever the next premium live special is after this. All right. So we missed last week's Raw, which meant we missed a pivotal moment in the Shawn Michaels Sid Vicious timeline. That being the completely out of the blue turn where Sid betrayed Shawn and left him for dead, which was done in large part to write Shawn off of TV for a while. And the angle itself was put together so haphazardly, you almost had to figure it was a last-minute change of plans. Because if you follow everything that led up to that point, I mean, the whole thing really makes no sense. And it wasn't like the Diesel-Shawn split where they were teasing it on multiple occasions for months and months. But they pulled the trigger last week, and we didn't get a chance to talk about it, so I figured I'd mention it at the top of the review here and make sure we don't gloss over any important detail. Lord knows we'd miss anything important during Raw in the year 1995. So that brings us to this week. We at least had a quality 6-man tag in the main event. But we are removed from WrestleMania. Next on the bucket list is, I believe, the first In Your House pay-per-view in May. Then eventually the King of the Ring in June. And if you know your 95 history well, you know what's coming down the pike. For now, we're pretty much in coasting mode. Still about a month and a half out from the next big event, which basically means we're back to the status quo Raw formula of an advertised main event plus 30 minutes of meaningless filler And nothing screams meaningless filler any better like the way they opened the show this week. Adam Bomb versus Tatanka. Yawn. I completely forgot about Adam Bomb. He's still around. You know, at least you could argue Tatanka was an integral part of the WrestleMania main event. If you count integral as him standing at ringside and being a punching bag for all the football players at certain points. I actually had a revelation while watching this. Maybe it was just more noticeable here because Tatanka was easily the better of the two workers. His punches look like shit. He's got that equivalent to the thigh slap spot I see a lot of guys do today. Whenever they go to throw a super kick, you can clearly see them smacking their thigh with the palm of their hand. With Tatanka, whenever he goes to throw a punch, you can plainly see him stomping his foot on the mat. He's not even trying to hide it. He's being so transparent about it. And the punches never came anywhere close to actually making contact with the guy. It's those and the tomahawk chops. They both look hideous. So the match is boring. I think I fell asleep twice watching it. And it only went like 10 minutes if you count commercial. They did some slow plodding offense for a while. And then they both rolled out to the floor and started fighting, which then led to the double countout. And it's not even like the countout got a reaction from the fans. That's the best part. They didn't boo. They didn't chant for Adam Bomb. They didn't clamor to see those guys go at it some more. They just said, well, that was a bullshit finish. No, whatever. On to the next segment. A not-so-great start to this episode of Raw. Can't wait for that eventual rematch with Tatanka and Adam fucking Bomb. That'll blow the roof off the joint. Get it? Because Adam Bomb, I forget it. So that eventually led directly into the Head Shrinkers versus Mike Bell and Tony DeVito, which was like 50 times more entertaining than it had any right to be. I loved how the go-to spot in the opening minutes here was Mike Bell running directly toward the Samoans to try to bonk their heads together. But of course, they're Samoan, so they no-sell the head bonk spot. Because as we know, after decades and decades of family lineage, I mean, it's pretty much well known that the Samoans have heads made of compound steel. So, of course, Fatu immediately runs after Bell and then bonks his head against DeVito's. And that knocked him loopy. I mean, it was just a basic head shrinker showcase. There was a great fuck-up here where Bell caught a knee to the back from the Barbarian, and he was supposed to go down selling, but he just forgot. So you see Mike Bell hit the ropes. Barbarian knees him in the spine. Mike Bell continues to run forward like 3 more steps. And then he goes, ah, shit. He falls over onto his stomach, writhing in pain. Epic fail. But the Head Shrinkers eventually went over with a splash. There's nothing wrong with it. But again, following the track record of a lot of these retro Raws, just filler. But then we got our first major item of business on this week's episode. Only took 15 minutes to get there, but we finally got something worth talking about. And of course, this is history we're documenting here. So take notes. write this one down because you want to save this date. Get ready for the exciting debut next week of Jean-Pierre Lafitte. Yup. The now repackaged Carl Ouellet of the former Quebecers. He is now Jean-Pierre Lafitte, the kayfabe relative of the famous French pirate Jean Lafitte. Because, the guy was legitimately blind in one eye. So Vince, the cunning thinking man, said, "I've got it. We'll make him a pirate. That's such good shit." And they tried to replicate it a decade later with Paul Burchill. And it died the same rancid death. So yes, for those uninitiated, they took one half of the Quebecers, gave him a pirate gimmick, actually tried to make him speak with a semi-pirate accent, and, well, it was fucking rotten. The only good to come out of it was that they were smart enough to immediately feud him with Bret Hart. That way they could at least have some decent matches together. The gimmick did not last long, as you'll come to realize. Another one of those blink and you miss it ideas that never really got off the ground. Then by 96, I think he and Jacques Rougeau reformed the Quebecers in WCW. Of course, they had to go under a different name at that point. It was something goofy, too, like the Amazing French Canadians. Something silly. But, well, we did get some good news for next week as well. The first opponent for Jean-Pierre Lafitte will be Duke the Dumpster. That'll be a hell of a humdinger. So then we got this ridiculous segment. I've been fuming over it for the past 24 hours. Actually seeing this all play out again. And I remember thinking to myself how bullshit it was as a kid. I'm like, I don't know, 9 years old, I think. 8 or 9, I can't remember. It's been a long time. The whole Sid Shawn angle. It was just so fucking idiotic. Everything about it just makes me want to puke. And I said at the top of the review, they blew off the Sid turn last week. Him laying out Shawn and leaving him for dead, basically. What I did not mention, though, is that it more or less facilitated what I believe is one of the most artificially contrived babyface turns in WWF history, that being the Shawn Michaels face turn. Never bought it at the time, and I still don't buy it after seeing it all these years later. Like, I even remember thinking to myself, when I was watching that whole interaction with him and Sid, the way Shawn was talking down Sid and getting in his face, I was just begging for Sid to fucking kill this idiot. And he did. He absolutely gave Shawn a receipt. And you want to know the most baffling part? They tried to babyface Shawn. They made Sid the bad guy in all this. What the fuck? Okay, so here's what happens. If you don't remember this, if you've never seen this footage before, I am not making any of this shit up. This is 100% fact. Everything that went down here. Shawn and Sid are in the ring. Shawn is talking about how he's accepted Diesel's rematch for the WWF title. And keep in mind, the entire time Shawn's cutting his promo here, nothing about this material makes him come off like a sympathetic person. I mean, he's still acting like a narcissistic dickwad. Finally, he tells Sid, I don't need a stinking bodyguard to watch my back. Especially not giant meatheads that cost me world title matches because of their incompetence. And he's totally throwing shade at Sid here. And I'm watching Sid's reactions like, who the fuck does this guy think he is? This puny little twerp. So he blows up in Shawn's face, calls him a piece of garbage, basically. I mean, from my vantage point, Sid is the fucking protagonist in all this. I don't care what anybody says. They wind up showing the exclusive footage after the show goes off air, where Shawn starts reading Sid the riot act. You know, Sid's laughing it off, making Shawn out to be a total scumbag. So, finally Sid snaps. He clubs Shawn in the back of the head, kills him with several jackknives. Of course, Shawn's a fucking prick around this time, so he purposefully sabotages the first one to make Sid look like a dope. Keep in mind, too, the entire time Sid is beating up Shawn and laying him out with power bombs, the crowd is fucking cheering him. And all the while, you got Vince doing his dubbed over commentary, trying to paint Sid out to be the villain, saying the attack is uncalled for, trying to make Shawn look like the sympathetic good guy in all this. I'm like, fuck you, dude. What a load of horse shit. I'm glad Sid beat up this little turd. I'd have done the same thing. Any rational-minded person would have done that. This is just all kinds of ass-backwards booking. Made no sense at the time. If Vince trying to go all in with his boyhood dream nonsense, it was utter garbage. Nobody bought it. Like Diesel coming out at the very end and calling for medical backup to attend to Shawn. Meanwhile, 2 weeks earlier, these guys were beating the crap out of each other on pay-per-view. Now, all of a sudden, it's revisionist history. We're just supposed to forget all that happened. Now Shawn and Diesel are friends again. It's so terrible. Everything about this. This was the kind of stuff that just made me loathe the WWF product around this time. Complete intentional rewriting of history, thinking we were all going to neglect it all. At no point during this exchange was Shawn ever a relatable good guy. He was the bully little toady that tried to pick a fight with a bigger guy and got his ass kicked. And rightfully so. How in the world he ever thought this would get babyface sympathy on Shawn? It's beyond me. So I hated this. If that wasn't already clear. It just made me want to turn the show off in disgust. That's how bad it was. And it's only the beginning, people. Get ready for another year and a half plus of this fucking horse shit. If you think it's out of control now, just wait until they put the strap on him. You ain't seen nothing. So moving on, against my better judgment, Kama wrestled Scott Taylor, or for you Attitude Era fanatics out there, The Godfather wrestled Scotty 2 Hotty. In hindsight, that match probably would have been better. Surely would have been more entertaining. The story here is that Kama repossessed The Undertaker's urn during the Mania match with King Kong Bundy. So they kept alluding to that promo he did where he threatened to melt the urn down and turn it into a giant necklace. Not sure if he ever completed this task. It's been, 2 weeks? I mean, if he hasn't done it already, I'm not sure what he's waiting for. Maybe he's looking for a decent welder. I wrote virtually nothing down about this. Kama won with a slingshot splash out of the corner. At which point, they redirected our attention to something I had also completely forgot existed on this program. The girls. Yeah, they are, they're still around too. A couple years after launching the women's division, the entire roster consists of 2 girls, Alundra Blaze and Bull Nakano. They wrestled last week in what I believe was their 473rd sanctioned match. And after Alundra won and reclaimed the women's title, we then saw the TV debut of Bertha Faye. She had jumped Alundra after the bell and beat the crap out of her. At one point, legitimately kicking her in the nose with the toe of her boot. I think she busted open Alundra hard way on that. It's always a good sign when the new debut potato somebody in their first encounter. But, yeah. That's pretty much all there was to that. They added a roster member. Only took them about 2 years to go from a roster of 2 to a roster of 3. But we are making progress in that women's division in the WWF. Enough progress to where in about 8 months, we see Alundra Blaze show up on Nitro and throw the belt in the garbage can. Good times ahead. So, well, before I go ahead and talk about the main event, I actually forgot that one of the selling points for the first WWF In Your House was them doing an actual sweepstakes contest. Giving away some 6-figure home in the Orlando area. And they made a big deal out of it. I remember they were doing tours. I think they actually picked the winner on the pay-per-view. Just more of that WWF history you try to like to forget. It's also nice to remember a time where a 3-bedroom home with an outdoor pool could still cost somewhere in the low 6 figures. In this economy, you'd be lucky to get something like that of value for the high 6 figures. So the main event, it's Hakushi, Owen Hart, and Yokozuna versus Bret Hart, Bob Holly, and the 1-2-3 Kid. I guess Holly and the Kid are still a functioning tag team. I thought they sort of let that team demise so Kid could go on to teaming with Razor, but nope, they're still together. This is also the first time they recognized Owen and Yoko as part of Jim Cornette's cult. They were not calling it Camp Cornette quite yet, but they pretty much acknowledged that Corny was their manager on a full-time basis. A lot of name power on this one. It was, I'd say, a pretty fun little main event, all things considered. Kind of a standard match layout where after the initial babyface flurry, the heels got to pick apart the Kid for a while. When Yoko was in there working him over, that's where I noted, Yoko's thighs are legitimately bigger than all of Sean Waltman's body. It is both sad and visually impressive. But overall, they kept things moving. A lot of constant in and out tags. There was a funny moment during this. Owen's on the floor waving the Japanese flag around. That leads to some banter with Lawler and McMahon on commentary. Lawler goes, "Oh, and she's showing respect for the Japanese." And Vince goes, "He's Canadian." There's a pause. You could tell Lawler's trying to think of some snarky comeback. But eventually he just says, "Well, he wishes he were Japanese." And Vince goes, "He does?" That was comedy. And of course, as the kid finally tags in Brett so he can fire up, he's able to get a little bit out of Yokozuna before pulling Hakushi in hard way. Obviously, those guys are going at it recently, so, Brett's trying to throw punches at him while everybody else is crowding the ring. Eventually, Owen gets in there and tries to hog the spotlight. He saw the chance to go after Brett while he was down, so he took advantage. And then we get the awesome finish where Brett is able to blind tag Bob Holly, and they do the old switcheroo into the ropes where Owen tries to clothesline Brett, but he ducks. And then Holly catches Owen with a schoolboy and pins him. Of course, Owen's doing a great pouting job and stomping the ring mat like a spoiled brat. That was great. I mean, all things considered, I really didn't have much to say about it. The action was good. Sometimes it doesn't lend itself to noteworthy material, but they all worked well. I mean, Yokozuna's physical state is beyond appalling at this point, but, he could still do a few things. Brett's ongoing 47 programs is kind of the focal matter of all this. The next big thing on the agenda is him and Hakushi. At least that's what seemed pretty obvious by the end here. Aside from that, we got the early signings of Owen and Yoko as a recurring tag team. Spark plug Bob Holly is still a thing. All-time rotten gimmick. And Owen Hart is the GOAT. What more can be said? I mean, the only thing I was really stewing on this week was that fucking pre-tape of Shawn's ridiculous babyface turn. I'll be having nightmares about that for the next month and a half. Aside from that, it was another retro Raw in the book. Another chapter of this long, treacherous 1995 trudge. And as we gear up for the first In Your House, I'll be doing some consideration on how I want to go about discussing those shows. Do we do full recaps of the In Your House events? Are they even worth it? I mean, they're all archived on the Peacock. It's not like I don't have access to them. Whether or not I want to rewatch all of them is another matter entirely. I will ruminate on giving it the old college try. If I end up reviewing them, they'll definitely be replacing that week's Retro Raw. But at least that might be a way to break up the flow a little bit with the Monday shows. It'll be another thing to add to my bucket list of things I don't have time for, but I'll do it anyway. Well, this is a bit of a heartbreaking way to open up the show. First thing we see on this week's NXT episode. A memorial graphic for the Ultimate Warrior. Shit. Guess it really has been 10 years, hasn't it? Time flies, bro. I'm not going to sit here for the next 10 minutes and do a speech about the legacy of the Warrior. I mean, the height of his popularity was unfortunately right around the time I was born and more or less just starting to gain interest in wrestling. I wasn't the biggest fan of the WWF during the early to mid-90s. It's like right when they put the Intercontinental title on him at the first SummerSlam, the eventual feud with Andre later that year. I mean, most of that stuff is kind of a blur to me. I obviously remember WrestleMania 6, like him beating Hogan to win the WWF Championship, basically becoming a dual champion by holding that and the IC title at the same time. And then there's the stuff later on with him and the Macho Man, which subsequently led to the quote-unquote retirement match that Savage lost. it's always a bitter pill to swallow for me because the guy was such a controversial figure in the wrestling world. You got the people that were huge Warrior marks, the ones that grew up idolizing him and seeing him as a huge megastar. And then there are people like me that, I don't know, I wouldn't say I hated the Ultimate Warrior growing up. I just wasn't a particular fan. I think a lot of that boils down to the fact that his matches were always the shits. And when you spent the majority of your life watching territory wrestling and even a decent amount of quality wrestling in WCW before all that kind of went kaput, it's hard to sit there and watch an Ultimate Warrior match without thinking, God, this guy's really not a fluid worker. And the stuff that I did briefly see of Warrior in places like Dallas or Mid-South, some of the Continental wrestling footage from Memphis, it's the same problem. Just remove all the glamour that was the Ultimate Warrior gimmick. When he was just bodybuilder Jim Hellwig, teaming alongside Sting or even doing his own singles work, there was just nothing to him. He was a big guy with a jacked physique who couldn't wrestle his way out of a wet paper bag. Still, he had a connection with a lot of people. Even during the territory runs, they were able to mask a lot of his inadequacies. So I can't say the guy was a flop in the wrestling business, because that'd be a ludicrous thing to say. He just wasn't my cup of tea. But I remember that WrestleMania retirement speech he gave on Raw. I remember the Hall of Fame induction. It was probably one of the more symbolic speeches you've ever heard from a wrestler. After years and years of nonsensical, incoherent psychobabble where you never knew what the fuck the guy was talking about, the speech he did on Raw, you could just tell from his inflection that he knew he didn't have a whole lot of time left on this earth. His health wasn't good. He was breathing heavily. His face was like beet purple. I think it was a day or two after the show? He was pronounced dead after suffering a heart attack in the parking lot outside his hotel. It's kind of scary to think about the timing of all that. But, it is one of the more significant deaths in the wrestling business. Prior to him, I think you'd maybe have to go back to Randy Savage a few years prior. But those two right there, Savage and Warrior, those were huge hits on the wrestling business, especially in WWE. But yeah, I just wanted to take a minute to address that because it is sad. Whether or not you consider yourself an Ultimate Warrior fan, the guy was a huge star in the WWF. Drew him a lot of money for a very short period. Yeah, he was a pain in the ass to work with behind the scenes. But so were a lot of the top guys in the industry around that point. A lot of our all-time favorites had demons they were trying to hide. I think Warrior gets singled out a lot just because of the fact that there's always been that budding dichotomy between wrestling fans and sports entertainment fans about his legacy. But feel free to argue in the comment section and let me know where you stand. I'd love to maybe chat more about that if it meant I didn't have to talk about some of this lame duck NXT programming. I'm going to try to make this quick because I really don't have a lot left in the tank at this point. It's getting late. My body's shutting down. And this show was mostly one giant waste of time. Didn't help that after they already revisited the Warrior news, first thing we hear from the announcers is a recap of WrestleMania the previous night, where they brought up the Undertaker's streak ended. That made me want to puke my fucking guts out. It's been 10 years, and I still never forgave the company for that bullshit booking call. So they opened with the Erotic Express dancing and prancing down to the ring. Still baffling when I look at that crew and see guys like Brawny the Strowman, knowing where he would end up a few years later. Here he is in 2014 as a dancing fool. The Adam Rose gimmick is now over with the NXT crowd. For Christ knows what reason. He wrestled Danny Burch. And my notes read, Rose did some really suspect-looking frolicking around the ring. Hit a couple decent arm drags at one point. And he eventually won with the Bret Hart diving elbow drop. Then there was some more dancing afterwards. Sucked. As did the Adam Rose gimmick. And then following that, Bayley wrestled Mercedes, Sasha, Bankrupt, No Monet in what I believe is now their 88th match in just the last 2 months. Okay, seriously, did we not just recap this exact match like 2 weeks ago? Or am I really spacing out that much? Or regardless, it was Bayley versus Sasha. It's the same match every time we talk about it. Sasha's annoying. She spends the entire match screaming like an insufferable harpy. Her offense generally doesn't look any good. Looks like a preteen trying to beat up her older sister and failing miserably. The one thing that really stood out to me here was just how rotten the commentary team was around this point. God, it was awful. I forget who the regular team is most weeks. I mean, they keep rotating people around depending on where they are in the taping block. This week, I know Matt Bloom was out there for color. He literally added nothing to the show. I'm not kidding you. His contributions to commentary this week were him going, "Ooh," or "Yeah," or "Get her, Bayley." He was the reactionary commentator. The comic book commentary, as I often refer to it. Y'all remember the comic book days, where you'd see all the action words like bam, and pow, and boom. That's what Matt Bloom was. He was the action word commentator. Totally useless. And, yeah, this division still sucks. I don't care what people said at the time. It's garbage. It's the same 4 or 5 girls having the exact same matches over and over again. Stories are lame. Characters are lame. The matches are usually downright abysmal. And they are still being referred to as divas. That's the ironic part. The girls people kept claiming were the future of the women's division. Here in NXT, still getting the same old standard WWE diva treatment. Meanwhile, they're wrestling in these skin-clad tights that are pulled almost all the way up their ass cheeks. Because let's be honest, I mean, that's all the people cared about anyway. So then Mojo Rawley wrestled Sylvester LaFour. And after Mojo won that, the announcers kept preaching about the power of positivity. Should have captained the New Day. But the bigger story to come out of this was everything that happened in the post-match. And I will go on record right now when I say this. Write this down. Keep it in a journal. Brodus Clay is my new favorite wrestler on NXT. This guy's fucking great. Went out there, killed LaFour with a powerbomb and a splash. Then he got on the stick and cut a menacing heat promo on Adrian Neville, saying he called him out last week and he stayed in the back like a coward. Says he's been sitting on the bench for years now, waiting his turn to get a shot. And he's done waiting around. He wants that little punk Neville out here right now. So out comes the great Adrian Neville. And he wastes no time getting in Clay's face. Tells him that for a main event guy, he likes to stand around and complain a lot. And whereas Brodus Clay has received opportunities in the past, the difference between him and Neville is that Neville hasn't squandered those opportunities. So they go nose to nose. A little bit of back and forth banter. And it ends up with Brodus Clay backing away and saying, "My time." But I was sitting watching this like 20 minutes into the show. Finally got some goddamn pro wrestling on here. It ain't hard. After they wasted nearly 20 minutes with that sports entertainment crap. All it took was Tyrus to come out and save the show. Anybody that's ever given this man a bad reputation needs to apologize right now. I've completely turned the page on Brodus Clay. He was awesome here. The big bully heel that tried to push his weight around until the scrappy underdog stood up to him. And then the bully heel backed up and walked away like a coward. They've somehow managed to get me to care about Adrian Neville versus Brodus Clay for the NXT Championship. Maybe the standards really are that low right now. Well, I can tell you what. It was surely better than the cable access segment that followed. This was something else. Glow producers were rolling over watching this. That's how bad the acting was. Well, first, Devin tries to interview the returning Oliver Gray. Who? Well, it doesn't matter anyway, because like the geek he is, he's immediately interrupted by Camacho, who then proceeds to totally blow off Gray so he can blatantly look off to the teleprompter on the side and cut a horribly recited WWE promo about Adam Rose. And while he's reciting all these overly rehearsed lines and doing a horrible job making it sound convincing, Gray butts in so he can challenge Camacho to a match next week. And then right as Camacho tried to walk away, Oliver apparently realized he was supposed to look intense. So he tried to look all angry and pissed off. Keyword was try. He failed. This was so bad I had to rewatch it twice. I had to convince myself it was that awful. Sure enough, I was proven correct in my theory. And my God, speaking of absolutely horrible segments, I forgot about this one. This next pre-tape was so beyond reproach. It utterly broke me. I just sat back and watched the train wreck unfold, laughed the whole way through. I couldn't hold it back. As soon as I saw Devin standing there getting ready to interview, of all people, the great Khali, I said, oh, dear God in heaven. They're actually going there. They're going to let this man speak in long form. And they did not swerve us. Oh no. They let Khali talk. And here is the extent of the riveting conversation these two had. Devin asks Khali how it feels to be in NXT. Because, you know, that's what robots typically do. They're programmed to cycle through the same stuff over and over again. It's the only line of questioning Devin ever has for her interviews. And Khali's linguistic response, a very crafty thinker that Khali is, he responded with, and I quote, "I feeling is good. I feeling so much good. Very, very good." Unquote. So he's feeling good, I take it. And if you thought it couldn't go any more off the rails from there, who should then run in, completely at random, but a very horny Bayley, who proceeds to grab Khali and hug him like a total creep, simultaneously while informing him that she admired his sweaty body. This is where I wrote, "We have now reached an all-time low on this program. I am covering my face in tears. I can't even write anything down. I'm laughing so fucking hard." And then following that, we have CJ Parker walk in from Offset. Why? I don't know. Apparently he was hanging out by the water cooler at the time. And his first words, as he walks in and looks up at Khali, he goes, "Please tell me you recycle." This did not help my composure. And after spending a minute implying that Khali's fecal matter is probably enough to destroy the entire planet in and of itself, well, I actually forgot what this all set up. I presume a match. Oh yeah, and Bayley apparently speaks Punjabi. Because of course she does. She's, well, she has plenty of time during her travels to study Middle Eastern languages. She's got a lot of spare time, you see. This was another segment that I rewatched twice, if you can believe that. Purely for entertainment purposes, though. I did not need to convince myself it was that bad. I knew it was fucking atrocious. I just needed to see it again because it was so horribly great. I may at some point try to play that entire segment back on the podcast just so you can hear it. It was quite a remarkable piece of business, that was. So, well, the show's completely hit a brick wall by this point. Now I'm just sort of having fun at its expense. It's that fucking bad. No sooner should I say that, who should come out but Bo Dallas. This is where I thought, all right, well, maybe business is going to pick up a little bit. Well, I don't know if I would say it picked up. It was definitely noteworthy. So Bo's out there doing his shtick. He's talking to all his Bo leavers about the Daniel Bryan Occupy Raw segment where he managed to get a bunch of plants to artificially change the main event of WrestleMania. Literally just by standing around the ring and protesting. So Bo's trying to get the NXT fans to do the same for him so he can get another title shot. And, well, it's very interesting how they did this. They actually used the NXT crowd as story advancement here. Because while Bo's trying to get the people to root for him and convince management that he deserves another title shot, you see them cut the camera around to various shots of the crowd. Half of them are basically turning their backs to Bo. Some of them are just sitting in their seats visibly confused. But, I mean, it's obvious these shots were pre-taped because, you know, when they go back to the live shot with Bo, you can see the vast majority of the people are still facing the ring. There's like maybe a handful of people with their backs turned. So they clearly did this earlier in the day so they could filter it into the show later on. It was kind of an interesting idea, I guess. I don't really recall the last time I saw the crowd get used as plot development. Probably because it's nearly impossible to get a large group of people to cooperate with a planned storyline. I mean, there's always going to be a handful of trolls. But Bo's basically ranting up a storm, saying that he was their champion for over 200 days. He did everything for him. I gave you cookies. That was a direct quote. I don't know why that line was funny, but it was. And so the story here is that the fans did protest, but they protested Bo's push. The fans rejected Bo getting another title shot, allegedly in favor of Brodus Clay. They'd rather see Brodus get the title shot than Bo Dallas. Now that's real heat. It was a cool idea, though. Can't say I hated the segment. It was just very obvious they had to pre-tape some of the crowd panning to make it fit in with the actual material of the segment. Even so, you still had a decent amount of people applauding Bo and trying to get behind them. But that seems to be the direction they're moving now. Getting ready to fizzle Bo out and send him up to the main roster. They're doing so by making him an out-of-control, deranged lunatic. They'll probably end up carting him off in a paddy wagon. I actually don't remember where this all goes, but I'm intrigued. I'm down to see Looney Bin Bo. Be far from the worst thing we've seen on NXT in the last how many months. But we're not done on the subject of Bo, because that actually carried over into the TV main event this week. After Bo's literally on his knees begging and pleading for the fans to get behind him, out comes General Manager JBL. And yes, Bradshaw is still the GM of the show, by the way. Despite us not seeing the guy on TV in months, he is still around. He tells Bo that he doesn't have enough people to help him occupy a seesaw. He's not going to grant him a title match, but he will grant him a chance to wrestle right now. So apparently JBL is a babyface all of a sudden. No idea when that happened. But Bo's opponent wound up being Justin Gabriel. And of course the story here is that Bo's not prepared to wrestle. So he's off his game for the majority of the match, complaining to the official. Still, because it's WWE, they can't just have Gabriel get a quick one on Bo and beat him in like 10 seconds. No, they still had to let the thing go over 10 minutes. Fans were heckling Bo with chants of "We want cookies" and "Bo ring." It actually wound up being a pretty decent little match by the end. Probably went to the well a little too much with the near falls. But Gabriel was a hell of an athlete. Dallas fed for his offense well. And it turned into one of those things where at the very end, Gabriel missed a springboard moonsault. Bo took advantage. Hit him with a double implant DDT. And he won. So even when Bo was on a downhill slide in his career, he's still able to believably beat underneath guys. So it is not an outright burial. So far, I'm digging what they're doing with Bo. It's different. I don't think anybody else could have pulled off this story. I mean, Bo is the perfect talent for this role. And like I said, I don't really remember where it all goes. I know it eventually leads to him leaving NXT. Can't remember if it was like a title versus career thing they did or what the payoff was. But I'm definitely interested. Can't say there's a lot of other stuff on this show that I'm interested with at the moment. But this episode in particular managed to get a good laugh out of me. There was so much bad material on it. Most of it just having the inverse effect of pissing me off. I just threw my hands up and said, fuck it. Show sucks. I'm going to have fun with it. It was like AEW for the first couple years. I mean, the shows were so bad by and large, but I could always find ways to entertain myself while watching. It's kind of where I am with retro NXT right now. And I know things do eventually get better, so I can at least whittle through a lot of the early stuff. Won't be easy. But if we get more shit like the Khali, Bayley, CJ Parker pre-tape, I can suffer through it. Especially if that means more Khali promos. They should have printed that one on a t-shirt. It would have sold millions. But, yeah. This will probably be one of the longer podcasts we do all year. So, hopefully you stuck the course with me. Glad everybody stuck around to check the show out. And, absolutely, make some comments. Let me know what you thought of WrestleMania 40. Good, bad, indifferent. I don't know. Let me know. And we will be back on Friday for more classic wrestling content. And, I'll catch you guys soon. Take care. Peace out.